So now we're going to graph a hyperbola. So to graph a hyperbola, you have to have a center, a vertex, covertex, and foci. Okay. So my center is the same idea as it was with an ellipse. Opposite of this number, opposite of this number. Just make sure you know where your x and y values are, because if your y is here and your x is here, the x number has to go with the x coordinate and the y number has to go with the y coordinate. The number that is first is your a value. Okay, so our first number here is 16. So my a value would be the square root of 16. Okay, so that value is going to be 4. So I'm going to add it, since this is underneath the x, I'm going to add and subtract from my vertex to my x value. So I'm going to add 4 here, so it's going to be 7, negative 1. I'm going to subtract 4, so it's going to be negative 1, negative 1. Okay, for my b value is underneath my y, so I'm going to take the square root of 4, and the square root of 4 is 2. And since it's underneath y, I'm going to add and subtract my y value here of my center. So I'm going to have 3, subtract 2 is negative 3, and 3 subtract or add 2 is positive 1. Okay? My c value is going to come from a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. I'm going to add the two together. With an ellipse, I was subtracting the two. So it's basically the opposite side of what you have here. And remember, a is the distance from the center to vertex. All right, that's important. B is the distance from the center to the covertex, and C is the distance from the center to the focus, or foci, or whatever you want to call it. Okay, so my C value, so I'm going to have 16 plus 4 is equal to C squared. So 20 is equal to C squared. So the square root of 20, and I don't have a calculator on me, but I'm going to guess it's around 4.5. Okay, if I'm wrong, I'm sorry. So C value is the square root of 20, which is around 4.5. Now, notice how here, when I did my vertices, I added this to my x coordinate. Or the foci is going to be done the same way. These two circled parts are always synced with each other. Okay, so I'm going to add 4.5 to my x value, which is 7.5, negative 1. I'm going to add 4.5 to my, or subtract 4.5 from my x value, so that'd be negative 1.5, negative 1. Okay, so those are always, vertex and focus are always together. All right, and remember the focus is getting eaten. It's the two dots that are in there. All right, so if I graph this, first thing I'm going to do is graph 3, negative 1, which is where my center is at. So there's my center. I'm going to graph 7, negative 1, and negative 1, negative 1. Those are my vertices. So 7, negative 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, negative 1 is a vertex, and negative 1 is a vertex. Okay, covertices are 3, negative 3, and 3, 1. So 3, negative 3 is a covertex, and 3, 1 is a covertex. And then my foci are 7.5, negative 1, and negative 1.5, negative 1. So 7.5, negative 1, which would be about right here, and negative 1.5, negative 1, which would be about right here. Okay? Here's how you graph this. And this is the only difficult part, I believe, that is to this. So to graph this, instead of making an ellipse circle, you're going to make a rectangle. And the diagonals of that rectangle are your asymptotes. So now when I go to graph this, I just follow my asymptote down to my vertex and then follow it back out. And the same thing here, follow it down to my vertex and then follow it back out. And there's my graph of my hyperbola.